Hi, my name is Erica Smith, and I'm here today to talk about the Mathematics STRAND project. For my project, I chose the second grade level, and I chose the topic of numbers and number sense. For that topic, I chose the Standard of Learning 2.NS.3.A, which states the student will use mathematical reasoning and justification to solve contextual problems that involve partitioning models into equal-sized parts, halves, fourths, eighths, thirds, and sixths. Model and describe fractions as representing equal-sized parts of a whole. So my thought process is a unit on fractions is probably going to be more than just one lesson. So definitely be more than just one lesson. So the idea for this activity is to introduce the second grade students to the concept of fractions. And this would be done by bringing in some homemade chocolate chip pies. And when I say pie, it's the kind of chocolate chip that you make, it's real big and you make it in a big pan. And so they would be in a circle. There would be 4 of them. And the idea would be that we would show a whole cookie. We would show it cut in half. We would show it cut in thirds and cut in fourths. So the students can start to kind of connect those ideas and those fractions with a real world concept. So the lesson would open up with those pre-baked cookies laying out front, and then we'd start a discussion. Okay, what are we talking about today? And we would then discuss what the differences are. You know, this one is one whole cookie. Is it still made up of parts? These other ones, how many parts are they made up of? You know, why is it important? Why would we cut a cookie like this? You know, and some of the answers obviously would be to share with our friends. Yes, this whole cookie can be cut into parts, and we'll continue that discussion until, you know, we get to the point, okay, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about fractions. These are called fractions. And then we will get out the fraction circles that the class will have as a manipulative, and they'll be able to then model themselves what each of those pies represent. So, you know, table A, show me pie number 1. Table, you know, B, show me pie number 2. And they'll be able to do that on their fraction circle so that they can start to manipulate those things right away. And then as we do that, we'll talk about, you know, the different parts, and then we'll move into direct instruction and modeling. And as part of that, we will then start to introduce those vocabulary words. Okay, you know, here's the fraction. This is the whole. Let's look at the half. Okay, we have 1/2. What does that mean? And so that's when the graphic organizer will come into play. So the students will be given a copy of this that has blanks, and their blanks will be missing, like their version of this will look the same, however they will have blanks, like this would be blank. Denominator might not be there, it might just be the definition. It might have one of these blank, and so on and so forth. So, but as a group, we would work on this together, and we would talk about, okay, first off, what is a fraction, right? And that most likely will have come out organically during that first opening part. But if not, you know, either way, we're going to reiterate it. And then we're going to talk about key vocab words, and then we're going to talk about parts of a whole and what that looks like in different areas here. So like parts of a whole and parts of a set, how that can still represent a fraction, even though it's not saying parts of a whole, right? And it's not, you know, a rectangle or a circle. It still represents, you know, a fraction as parts of a set. And then we'll talk about the tools that we can use to measure fractions and to kind of display and represent fractions, right? So a fraction bar, a number line. And so we'll talk about those as well. And then the students will put this, the idea would be that they would have a fraction notebook, since it is going to be multiple lessons. And so they would keep that graphic organizer for future reference in that binder. And so then as we go through and we fill the graphic organizer out, we'll talk about different ways we can represent the fractions, like we talked about the number line, the fraction bar, and we'll start to represent some of those things with those tools, including the fraction circles. And then as we transition into direct instruction, we'll start to then do a little bit of a review of kind of what we just talked about. Okay, we talked about fourths, we talked about halves, we talked about wholes, and we talked about a numerator, denominator, equal parts. We talked about all of these things. So now in a group activity, they'll each have a whiteboard, and what we'll do is, as a class, I would say, okay, here's a fraction. What is the numerator? And they would each have a couple seconds to put down their answer and hold it up. And then we would, kind of look at that. And that would give me an idea of like what the kids know, what still maybe isn't clicking, and then I can have an opportunity to reteach at that point. And then when they move to an independent practice, they'll actually use technology. They'll log into Kahoot and they'll complete an activity there based on 6 different questions on kind of what we went over. And so this, as it expands, if it's something they pick up quickly, we can move right on into the next level of fractions, the 6th, the 8ths, the 12ths, and then we can also talk about more complex fractions. So that's the gist of the project. So thank you for your time.